Dimasiara Bude, Salbonani, greetings, Nyalibingelela. My name is Begezela Mkoni and I work for the Girls Table. So the Girls Table is a non-profit organization that amplifies young women's voices on socio-economic, political and cultural issues through media. So today we want to talk about gendered impact of corruption. It's one of the issues that affect young women. I am joined by Tuba to discuss the issue. Tuba, may you please introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for having me today, Bege. My name is Tubeli Sengube. I am a lawyer by profession and I am a gender inclusion officer, and I am very passionate about gender mainstreaming.
Tuba, thank you so much for having you. Like you said, how does corruption affect women and girls in the society?
So when we talk of corruption, maybe just to have lay basic understanding so that people can understand what we're talking about. When we talk of corruption, we're talking of the abuse of public office, public authority for private gain. So when we talk of women and young girls, we say then corruption affects more the vulnerable groups in society. Talking of the vulnerable groups in society will then bring us to the issue of women. We talk of people living with disabilities and young girls as well. So what makes them more vulnerable to corruption is that women, due to their roles as the natural caregivers, that is taking care of the homes, raising the children, taking care of the basic needs that happen in the everyday to-day life of a home setup, makes them more vulnerable to corruption than men, because at the end of the day they are the ones who will then interact with the health system when they take the children to hospitals. And naturally, for some fun reasons, also looking at issues around SR, HR, women are the ones who would visit hospitals more than men. Then you have also issues to do with enrollment of children at schools or their education. It's mainly women who take care of basic things like that. So yes, we have got men coming through most of the times with the financial side of things, but the people who actually interact with the service providers at the end of the day are women. So them being the ones who interact with the service providers make them more prone or more vulnerable to corruption as compared to men. So the everyday today, what would usually refer to as petty corruption is actually encountered by women more than men.
Thank you so much, Tuba. Please explain what petty corruption is. But you mentioned the issue of women being the ones that go to the hospitals, taking children to the hospitals. I'd want to understand what's the impact of corruption on service delivery, but please make someone from the rural communities, marginalized communities, understand what is petty corruption.
Corruption being the broad term that it is, we have got different types of corruption that then people encounter. When I talk of petty corruption, I'm talking of the everyday corruption that would then, we even have terms for it, like imali, where maybe you just get to a queue and instead of queuing like everyone else, there's this guy who queues on behalf of people and then they say, just give me $1 and I make you jump the line. So it's not really a big form of corruption. You didn't spend too much to actually get that service done to you, and it has got little to bear impact on the societal service delivered. That is what we refer to petty corruption. And then the difference there now, why we have petty corruption, is because we have got grand corruption. When you talk of grand corruption, we are then talking of the situations where large amounts of money are actually used. For example, we had the drug scandal during COVID, where we had large amounts of money that were misused. You had PPE materials coming through and so forth. That is grand corruption, and a whole lot of scandals that I can think of that then would affect the nation at large, and everyone is aware and a lot of money is involved. So petty corruption is the everyday one that probably you have also been a part of someday, somehow in your life. That is petty corruption. The $2, the dollars that you pay and so forth to just initiate and grease a certain service, that is petty corruption. So then when it comes to service delivery, like I explained at the beginning of the show, to say corruption is the abuse of public office for private gain. Service delivery is actually a public thing that people are supposed to benefit from fairly as a nation. We can have look at the health system, look at the education system, or whatever other public service system that you can think of that is also well, corruption is actually a broad issue. So it's like when you ask questions, and because I'm passionate about these issues, I keep having a lot of things that then come to mind. You see the system of taxes where people are buying their groceries and there's VAT there at the end, 15%, whatever, the taxes that we're getting from our salaries if you are formally employed. But I think the most definite example that affects everyone is when people buy groceries and there's VAT there and issues like that. Those are the taxes that we're talking about that then feed service delivery. So when you are then going to get a service from a public institution, as a human being who is a Zimbabwean and is protected by the constitution, you have got the right to demand that service, or if it's free of charge or there's an official amount that you're supposed to pay. So the minute you are paying an extra fee, you are already going the extra mile and paying for something to someone who's already in an office, getting paid for it. For instance, say maybe the passport office. You go to the passport office, you want to get, that is Home Affairs, that is a public institution. You go to Home Affairs, you want to get your passport. You've got someone who's already employed there, maybe they are the clerk or whatever they are. They get paid on a monthly basis. So they are in that office and they're supposed to deliver to you free of charge after you pay that certain amount. So when you are paying that little amount, then you are then screwing the system along the way and giving someone something that is not supposed to be theirs, and then compromising service delivery for those who don't have the extra amount to give to that person. So now because that person knows that there's a system where they can make extra for something they're supposed to be doing free, they then now want to capitalize on that. So what then happens to the next person who cannot sustain or pay for those petty services that are there that people then want to add on top of something that's supposed to be given to you naturally? So do you see the disparities then that then come into play?
The majority of us define corruption as grand corruption. We don't see ukuthi khona phana nxa ngisiya kumelayini ekseni kusiyakhiwa amanzi ebhawuzeni ngime phambili ngithi abantu abangibhadala ukuthi ngime phambili. That's corruption. But then again we are talking of the impact of corruption ukuthi khona kuyani ukubhadaliswa kuma passport okufana nalokho esikwenza masithatha ama license. Yes. Uze kuthiwa nxa uthe thatha license ukuze uthole license ubhadala 150. Badifaka 150 ukuze ujabulise lowo onguyo yabe ongu instructor wakho ukuthi uzutho babulala system kakhulu okusiphambanisayo thina the marginalized, you know. So kunzima ukuthi ngiyethatha i-passport because angi afford i-300. But I want to understand ukuthi as a young woman, as women, what role can we play in fighting corruption?
Number one way of fighting corruption is to resist corruption. But then we'll then get to weigh then the situation and what someone is going to get out of that situation. So most of the times really someone would think, like for instance, right now maybe there's issues of people going to the UK for care work. You now have got your links of going there, you now have got your sources. The only thing you don't have is a passport. Then you go to a passport office and someone says, I need $100 for you to get your passport fast. Someone will then go back, sit down and think, but $100, get my passport and get out of here, better opportunities and so forth. Or, in the process, the passport yami iphume late and then I failed to go to the UK. So the most natural thing to do would be to say, Madam Fatale, then yeah, I'm done. So that's why I will say, yes, number one, very definitely is to resist it. Resisting. But for people to resist it, that means that we should be in an enabling environment, an environment that allows us to resist it. But then, as women now, the unfortunate part, most of the times when you talk of corruption, the assumption is that someone then greases a certain hand to get a certain service using money. That is what would look at when you're looking at a bribe. We say then the bribe is in the form of money and so forth. You want to get a service, you bribe. Bribe is another form of corruption, by the way. There is nepotism as well. where people are employing each other because of their lineages and how they know each other when it's not on merit. So when we are looking at all those things, the assumption is always that that person paid a certain amount of money to get that thing done. But then what we fail to understand about women is that what then comes to play, most women being the vulnerable groups in society, and where patriarchy actually placed us in the whole society system, most of us then, yes, now there's empowerment and so forth, but naturally most women are at home, most women have got a less source of income compared to men. So in instances where you cannot pay in monetary form for a certain service, there is the option of people asking for a sexual favor in return of a service, which is what we call sextortion. So most of the times, women are vulnerable to what we call sextortion, which is why we've got these terms like carpet interviews. What other terms are there? Sexually transmitted degrees. It's a lot where women are actually becoming victims, where they end up using sex as a form of payment, which will then compromise their health whatsoever. I can go on and on and on and on about it. So, but then what makes women more vulnerable is that issue of sextortion. Then we say again, when it comes to corruption, report it. But then the complexities then now that come with sextortion. Sextortion is not criminalized in Zimbabwe. So when you report sextortion, there isn't exactly a charge that is there to say this person violated this part, the elements of the crime are this one, so we are going to do this is how they are going to be charged. Because with sextortion, then it's two people there. And someone says, okay, instead of you doing this, you are going to give me this, and then I'm going to do this for you in exchange. So when you refuse, there is no crime. You refuse, life goes on. That's it. There was no crime established there. Then again, when you give in, because then you want a certain service delivered, unlike rape where there are other elements of crime, there is violence, there is unlawfulness, there is intention, or whatever is put there when you're talking of elements of a crime for rape. Sextortion is just when people converse and say, I want this from you. If you give me this, I'm going to give this to you. So if you give in and you go and report and the police are asking you, did you use force? Did he threaten you? Did you whatsoever? And you're like, no, there's no crime again. Yet here, this is abuse of authority, abuse of office, someone taking advantage of their position and using it to gain more power from the next person. But then unfortunately, it is not criminalized in Zimbabwe. So what women really need to do when we talk of corruption and women is for us to join forces in solidarity together and advocate for the criminalization of sextortion. Because as long as sextortion is not criminalized, then the fight against gender corruption remains minimal and barely effective in Zimbabwe. Women will continue being victims. You go to university, you want to get your degree, the lecturer is being impossible, not going to graduate. You know the situation at home, your mother sacrificed so much for you to go there. At the end of the day, you're thinking, you know, am I going to lose much from this or so forth? So most of the times then women become victims of that. Although of course we are not saying men are not victims. Yes, men become victims sometimes, but the people who are largely affected are women.
While talking about sextortion, there is a question that I've always wanted to ask, really. We had a conversation sometime last year with some people. Can we say ubeke angathi yena sengimgadisa imota sayafika eCholocho kumbe ePlumtree kumbe eBaitbridge. Nxa efika eBaitbridge sokumele abhadale ubeka bese sithi mina ngilamali ungalala lami. There are instances even kuma tertiary institutions oyabe usunanzelela ukuthi abantu abaningi bayaphumelela as girls ngenxa yokuthi ulalelo bani kulo lecturer vele simazi ukuthi ungalala laye. Definitely you know ukuthi uzapasa. Can we say that is sextortion when I go and say bakithi ngimtshengisa use ukuthi semina mawungalala lami sextortion ngenxa yokuthi ngifuna ama marks lami ngoba ngiyakwazi nxa ngingayenza njalo ngizapasa. Can we say that is sextortion kumbe?
And we said you've got someone who's in authority, taking advantage of that authority to get private gain. And then we say it again that men are victims as much as women are victims. So there are instances where it's the other way around and the man is the victim and the woman is not the victim. But then you went on to give an example to say in a school institution, a tertiary institution where girls are the ones who are then going to lecturers and throwing themselves to the lecturers to say, I want to pass a me. That lecturer is employed by the Ministry of Education or whoever employed them under that institution. And them being an employee of that institution, they've got a certain code of conduct and certain policies that they abide to. Them being part of an institution means that there are things that they follow and so forth. And in part of his contract there, is there anything that gives him the authority to get sex as an exchange for a certain service? So in a situation where a girl is actually offering themselves to that person, his contract, his code of conduct, his policies that are there at work actually block him from doing that. So the minute he gives into that, he's not only in violation of you, but he's in violation of his employment contract. So he has got a duty to actually act accordingly to his employment contract, more than his needs, his body needs or whatever, the givings that he wants to give to you after offering to them. He still has that contract that binds him and he has to be in line with that contract. So when then he does that, he is abusing his office, his authority, because his authority doesn't give him any green light to do that. So it still is sextortion. It's power dynamics. That person is in an office, there's a contract that binds him to work in a certain way, yet he still gives in to what you would love to call to say someone who's throwing away. But really at the end of the day, the real issue there is power dynamics and someone abusing their office. Do you get what I'm saying? So who abuse the employment contract, who abuse what he's supposedly supposed to be doing, no matter what you did. When I will a contract employer work, but he's in breach of that and abusing his office because he's in more power than you at that certain moment. So yes, it's still sextortion.
The reason why I'm asking this, it's not just about tertiary institutions. I've had conversations with some people who say, "Yakwazi ku newsroom ulonkazana uyathola eziletha ngenxa yokuthi kafuna ukuletha diary, ufuna yena ukupasa engenzanga lutho." So they turn it and make it seem like as women thina siyazithrowa kibo. So I wanted to clarify that ukuthi ngingaze ngiziphosele, but makunguwe ophethe
power dynamics, yes. Your contract does not anywhere give you a green light to say in the event that someone is not fulfilling their duties, you can then grease them by having a sexual activity with them or whatsoever. Your contract is actually clear, maybe terminate the contract or whatsoever. So are you going to the extent of then having a sexual favor in return of someone's performance?
I'd want to understand in what ways does corruption contribute to gender-based inequalities?
So and then we look at gender-based inequalities and so forth. What then would happen then when we are looking at the issue of corruption? As I've already mentioned, that most of these services that we need would then need to be greased here and there for you to get it. So in the event that sextortion is then not even an issue and it's an issue of a monetary benefit, women are always, most of the times, yes, now we've got women that are empowered, women that work, women that make their own income or whatsoever, but our earnings, when we talk of equality, and it's always been about us getting equal pay, us getting equal salaries and so forth. So we've got less to offer. So when you have got less to offer, then you don't have access to those things that will then break the barriers and bring us to level ground with men when it then comes to equality. So when you are failing to access certain things that a man would easily access, they say they need $20 and that man pays for it. So you see, men continue being at the top of the ladder while we remain being the small fish in this whole thing. So that's why women continue. And again, we spoke of sextortion. It's now common when people see you doing good as a woman, the first question that they'll then ask, people want to know if your boss is a he or a she. People want to know the kind of qualifications that you have, because it's so common that women people believe sextortion has been so loosely used, that people think it's okay if a woman is doing something, then it's definitely because of sextortion, definitely because. So imagine a woman who's in a certain form of authority, the kind of power that she then has around the people report to her. It's barely minimal, because there is this doubt that people have in the back of their heads to say she didn't get her own merit. She didn't get your own merit and so forth. And in the event that you can't give in to sextortion, you don't have monetary bribery, that means you remain the far end of the rat. And because men already are the ones, when you talk of affirmative action, equality and so forth, men are already in those offices, and we are trying to fight to get to those offices. So if they block it up there with these things like sextortion and so forth, we are never going to get there. So the gap will never be closed.
It just came to my mind issue yomunye nje uminister ngomunye umnyaka abantu abembuza ukuthi what your academic what uthole ungene njani ukuba nguminister, omunye wafaka inyawo zithe. So I'm just wondering ukuthi you know what does it mean. But lastly, I would want to ask ukuthi what are the policies or strategies that have been effective in addressing gendered impact of corruption?
Well, unfortunately for Zimbabwe, we still have a long way to go. Of course, now we have these small policies here and there that speak into some of these things, issues around bribery, issues around extortion, issues around embezzlement of funds, or whatsoever form of corruption that you can think of, are actually issues that are somehow mentioned in the Criminal Codification Act, Criminal Codification and Reform Act of Zimbabwe, where people can actually get remedies from that to say, okay, if someone did this is a corrupt activity, they can be punished like this. If someone did this, they can be. So yes, we have got those things like that women can also get to benefit from. But then, like I had said earlier on, to say, unless and until we have something that is specific to sextortion, then women remain being at the other side of things. So we can claim whatsoever remedies from every other form of corruption that then affects everyone. But the main one that comes to mind when you talk of gendered corruption, which is sextortion, remains unanswered. So as long as that is not answered, we are not going anywhere. There's been advocacy around that until July of this year, where we had the Labour Amendment Act, and the Labour Amendment Act actually now speaks into sexual harassment, and sexual harassment has been criminalized in the workspaces. But there's still a lot that needs to be done. The same way that sexual harassment has been criminalized, we still need something that will then be specific to sextortion, because you can't talk sexual harassment and leave sextortion behind. It's like they are twins, somehow they move hand in hand. So if the nation is willing to have discussions around sexual harassment, then we should also be willing to have discussions around sextortion, because some scopes of sexual harassment do not speak into sextortion.
Thank you so much, Tuba. I hope siyafunda okunengi as women, and will play our part in making sure we fight corruption, because many a times we are the ones who are affected. Talking about the issues of service delivery, but from the girls' table, siyabonga. Until next time, thank you so much, Tuba. Please don't forget to follow us on our social media pages. If you want to see this, go YouTube channel here to check. It's the girls' table. You can like and subscribe, share your comments. Siyabonga. Constructive criticism, kuyasincedisa ukuthi sikhule. With Twitter, it's table_girls. Instagram, the.girlstable. With Facebook, it's the girls table. From the girls table, siyabonga. Until next time, thank you.